So Jimmy Kimmel has been suspended indefinitely by ABC. Not benched for a week, not quietly shuffled off for a quote-unquote vacation, indefinitely. And the reason? A monologue that dared to touch the third rail of the current culture war. Charlie Kirk's assassination and the political fallout that followed. Now, I could sit here and try to defend what Kimmel said, parse the language, argue about the intent versus impact, but honestly, what's the point of all that? In this climate, nuance is completely dead. The monologue is already being dissected like it's a Supreme Court ruling, and defending it would be like trying to explain satire to a brick wall. So I'm not going to waste my time in this video. What I do want to talk about is the hypocrisy. The absolute gall of people who've spent the last decade screaming about cancel culture, how it's destroying comedy, silencing dissent, ruining art, yada yada yada, and now suddenly they're cheering because it came for someone they don't like. You can't have it both ways. You can't eat your cake and have it too. Whatever phrase you want to go with, they both mean the same thing. Tomato, tomato, potato, potato. You don't get to cry foul when your favorite pundit gets deplatformed, then pop champagne when Jimmy Kimmel gets pulled off the air. That's not principle. That's tribalism. And let's be clear. I've never been a fan of Jimmy Kimmel. To me, he's always been the safe late-night host. The interviews feel sanitized, the jokes pre-approved by PR teams, and the whole vibe reeks of corporate control. Compare him to Conan O'Brien during his NBC and TBS years, or Craig Ferguson's run on The Late Late Show from 2005-2014, and the difference is night and day. And I'm not talking politics here. Conan was a bleeding heart liberal. I'm talking about tone, edge, authenticity. Kimmel's show has felt like an extended apology tour for his past on The Man Show, which, let's not forget, was a frat boy fever dream of beer, boobs, and bro humor. Even early episodes of Jimmy Kimmel Live carried the fingerprints of that era. Over the last 15 years, it's felt like he's been trying to scrub that legacy clean, one safe interview at a time. But this isn't about whether I like Kimmel. It's about the broader pattern. Because the people celebrating his suspension are the same ones who've been railing against cancel culture for years. They're the ones who said comedy was dying because you couldn't make jokes anymore. They're the ones who defended every offensive tweet, every edgy stand-up bit, every controversial casting decision, until the target wasn't a leftist, but a conservative. Then suddenly, it's consequences. Suddenly it's accountability. Suddenly it's good riddance. Let's rewind the tape a bit. Remember when Elvis Presley was nearly banned from TV because he shook his hips on the Ed Sullivan Show? That wasn't the radical left. That was conservative outrage. Remember the Satanic Panic of the 1980s? Dungeons and Dragons was a gateway to devil worship, they said. Ozzy Osbourne, Ryan James Dio, Kiss, they were all accused of corrupting the youth with Satan's music. That wasn't Tumblr activists. That was right-wing Christian hysteria. Even Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Were labeled as sinful by conservative groups when they started gaining popularity. And let's not forget the Dixie Chicks, banned from every country radio station for criticizing George W. Bush in the Iraq War. That was 2003, and to this day, country music fans still haven't forgiven them. But if we're talking about cancel culture with any historical honesty, we have to go back even further, to the 1950s during McCarthyism. The Hollywood Blacklist wasn't just about the so-called Hollywood 10 that include Donald Trumbo. It swept up actors, writers, directors, and musicians. Guys like Burgess Meredith, Zero Mostel, Charlie Chaplin, Lloyd Bridges, Orson Welles, Burl Ives, and many, many more. Careers were destroyed, lives were upended, and what's especially absurd is that the House Un-American Activities Commission targeted Hollywood almost exclusively, as if Broadway was some kind of communist-free zone. The hypocrisy was baked in from the start. It wasn't about rooting out ideology, it was about controlling the culture, about silencing voices, about making sure that the wrong people didn't have a platform. So don't give me this revisionist history that cancel culture is a left-wing invention. No, no, no. The right wing practically wrote the playbook. The left just started using it against them in the 2010s when they gained power. And now the right wing are crying foul. It's like watching someone get hit with their own boomerang and then scream that the boomerang is unfair. And now we've got Charlie Kirk, a name I'll admit I hadn't even heard before he got roasted on South Park. That's not a dig, by the way, it's just reality. Not everyone lives in the same media bubble. But suddenly, if you don't mourn Charlie Kirk, if you don't treat his death like a national tragedy, you're an evil leftist revolutionary. The same outlets that mock people for being upset about George Floyd or Breonna Taylor are now demanding empathy and reverence for a guy most people didn't even know existed until last week. And if you don't comply, well, then you're part of the problem. It's the same energy we saw in the 2010s when movies like Ghostbusters 2016, Ocean's 8, and the 2019 Charlie's Angels reboot came out. If you didn't support them, you were a sexist, a misogynist, a bigot, every name in the book. Okay, the anti-SJW crowd pushed back hard, saying that you should be allowed to criticize art without being labeled an ist. And fair enough. But now, those same voices, guys like Tim Pool, Matt Walsh, Razorfist, and the rest of them, are doing the exact same thing. If you don't show sympathy for Charlie Kirk, if you don't denounce Jimmy Kimmel, then you're a radical leftist. You're dangerous. You're part of the woke mob. Congratulations, anti-SJWs. You've become the very SJWs that you used to mock. And let's talk about the mechanics of this suspension. Kimmel's monologue didn't even focus extensively on Kirk. He condemned the murder, called it senseless, and criticized the political spin that followed. He mocked MAGA supporters for trying to distance themselves from the alleged shooter and pointed out the vile reactions on social media from both sides. That's it. But Nexstar Media Group, which owns over 200 ABC affiliates, refused to air Wednesday night's episode, calling Kimmel's words, quote, offensive and insensitive. FCC Chairman Brendan Carr threatened broadcast standard violations. ABC folded like a lawn chair. And here's the ultimate irony. By suspending Jimmy Kimmel, ABC and Nexstar have immortalized that monologue. It's now a cultural artifact, a moment that would have faded into the late night ether like most monologues do within a day or so, has been elevated to infamy. It's the same dynamic we saw with the Oscar slap in 2022. Will Smith bitch slapped Chris Rock over a joke about Jada Pinkett Smith, and suddenly the entire ceremony is overshadowed. That joke? It would have been forgotten in 10 seconds, maybe 15 at the most. But the slap made it unforgettable. The reaction became the story. Kimmel's monologue was headed for the same fate. An edgy riff in a weeknight broadcast, maybe clipped for social media, maybe not. But now, it's the monologue that got him suspended, possibly fired. It's been etched into the culture war timeline, and not because of what he said, but because of how the system reacted. That's the real legacy. It's not the joke, it's not the punchline, it's the overreaction. This isn't just about Kimmel, it's about the precedent. Damon Lindelof has pledged never to work with Disney again over the suspension. Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart have both spoken out, defending Kimmel and warning about the chilling effect this could have on free speech. David Letterman called it managed media in misery, accusing ABC of sucking up to an authoritarian administration. And he's right. Because when the government starts pressuring networks to silence comedians, we're not just talking about cancel culture anymore. We're talking about censorship. And censorship doesn't care about your politics. It doesn't care if you lean to the left or you lean to the right. It only cares about control. Today it's Jimmy Kimmel. Tomorrow it could be someone you actually like. And when that happens, I hope you remember this moment. I hope you remember cheering when the hammer came down on someone you didn't care for. Because that hammer doesn't discriminate. It just swings. So no, I'm not going to defend Jimmy Kimmel's monologue. I don't need to. The real issue isn't what he said. It's what happened after. It's the hypocrisy, the selective outrage, the weaponization of cancel culture by the very people who claim to oppose it. If you're going to be anti-cancel culture, be consistent. Otherwise, you're just another partisan hack playing dress up as a free speech warrior. And if you're still not convinced, just ask yourself this. Would you be okay with this happening to someone on your side? If the answer is no, then maybe it's time to stop pretending this is about morality and start admitting it's about power. Because that's what cancel culture has always been about. It's never been about justice. It's never been about accountability. It's always just been about power.